Hey guys, Diane here, and today I'm super excited to share with you my top horror books of all time. This is a two-part series just because I didn't want it to run too long. So the first video is going to be 20 through 11, and then my second one will be 10 to my number one. Now these books will change. These are going to change with my mood, but as of today, as of right now, these are my favorite books of all time. So without further ado, we're going to start with number 20, and that is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. This is about 4 horror authors. They have all been invited to stay the night on Halloween night at a very famous, a very haunted house. And they stay the night, they make it through, and they all go on to seemingly lead normal lives after that. That's not what happens. The house has kind of all followed them into their individual lives. And this is a little different of a take on a haunted house because most of the story doesn't take place in the house, but the dread and the heaviness and the very sinister feeling has all followed them. So this has been a favorite of mine for a long time. Like I said, this is something that is going to kind of keep you on the edge of your seat and keep you wondering what is going to happen and what is going to be the catalyst to kind of bring them all back together. So that was Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. So next we have Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And this is about Patricia. She's a stay-at-home mom. She's kind of getting bogged down by just life, basically. The kids, the house, all that, that goes along with being a mom. She has a book club. They love true crime. This is kind of their genre that they kind of escape into. But there has since been a mysterious neighbor that has kind of come into the new neighborhood. And a lot of sinister things have started to happen since he's been there. Kids have gone missing and just a lot of strange occurrences. And Patricia seems to be the only one that is kind of putting 2 and 2 together to say, hey, this kind of all started with this guy. No one believes her. So this is kind of a story of her kind of putting her voice out there, being heard, but it's also, I would say this is a mix between maybe Steel Magnolias and Dracula. I love both of those things. This is a perfect mix between those two because you feel like you're going through her life, her family bonds, her friends, and all of those things, but you also have this sinister darkness that is intruding on not only her life, but the lives of her family and her friends. And this book, I laughed in this book, I cried in this book, I was scared. I feel like it just has a little bit of everything. And then next we have Bloodkin by Steve Resnick Tim, and this is a dark Southern Gothic vision of ghosts, witchcraft, snake handling, kudzu, and the Great Depression. This is kind of about a generational curse and buried secrets. I love a good Southern horror story, and this is one of the finest. This is not a super well-known book. I did talk about this book on my Bram Stoker Award winners, and this is one that just kind of stuck with me after I had made that list because it felt so encapsulating. And this is one that I would recommend you read in the summertime because it is very hot. It's very oppressive, and it's very it kind of follows you out of the story. So this is something that I feel like would be a great read for the summer, but anytime. And then we have The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and I've talked about this book many, many times. This is a favorite of mine. I don't feel like this will ever retire from this list, but this is about 2 Southern families. They are linked by marriage, and they have just gone through a very traumatic and very strange and disturbing funeral. And so they're trying to escape. They're going to go to their beach houses on the coast, and they have 3 beach houses, 2 that are perfectly fine. One is slowly being encapsulated by the sand, and as it's being eaten by the sand, this very dark and sadistic spirit is being let loose and is trying to basically eat the family from the inside out. And this is yet again another dark Southern Gothic. I didn't realize I had grouped so many of them together, but as you can tell, that's a genre I really enjoy. And Michael McDowell, as you can see, I have my little Beetlejuice earrings, but this is, it feels very similar to Beetlejuice, but better. This is definitely darker. It's not a lighthearted book by any means, but it's also, you have those familial ties, which is a pretty strong lore in especially the Southern Gothic stories that really kind of questions if these people weren't related, would you really want anything to do with them? So this is a story that I really loved. I really enjoyed. It stuck with me. I read this probably 5 or 6 years ago, and this has been on my favorite ever since then. And then next we have Come Closer by Sarah Gran. In this book, I have recently talked about on my Halloween list, on a few other lists, because it's something that I really enjoyed. This is about a young woman, and she can't decide if she's slowly losing her mind and just sinking into madness, or if a sinister force has taken over her life and is trying to take over her mind. You really don't know up until the very end if she is losing her mind or if she's being possessed, and this is just a very dark and scary ride because you don't know what's real and what is kind of created by her paranoia. But this is something that will definitely scare you. If you're not scared by this book, then I need to know what you're scared of. Let me know in the comments, because if this doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. And then we have The Deep by Nick Cutter. And Nick Cutter, I feel like, is one of those authors that you know you are going to get an amazing story and a very scary and demented read. But this is about a plague that has broken out. It's called the Gets. People are forgetting at first just menial things. You know, they forget where their keys are. Did they turn the lights off? And then it gets a little more ominous to where they're forgetting how to drive. They forget how to breathe. And eventually they just kind of die because they've forgotten how to breathe and how to live. And they are thinking that they have found the cure 8 miles under the ocean. And so the lead scientist, they are sending his brother down because they have lost all communication with the lab that is under the sea. So this story is not only about their journey to find a cure, but also about the brothers, their relationship, their childhood, the turmoil that they've kind of gone through in their lives, and why it makes them perfect candidates for this situation. And this is a very dark and grotesque and gory story. The Deep is famous for a reason, because this is scary. This is one of those books that you're not going to forget. There's a few instances in this book that I can remember with clarity that has never left me and never will. I don't want to mention it because it would be a spoiler, but if you haven't read The Deep, you've got to read it. It is such an amazing book. And then next we have Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. And this is about a man, a real nasty man, and he has kind of lost, his zest for life. He feels like he has experienced all the sensuality that this world has to offer, so he's seeking it in another world, and he's kind of found that in this lacquered box and unleashed a power that he has no way of really controlling or really outliving. And so this is kind of his story. It is linked to his brother and his wife, whom he is having an affair with. And it's almost like a really supernatural soap opera type of thing, but it's such a great story. This is a pretty popular one. If you haven't heard of it, you turn this video off and you got to start reading this, because this is it's a movie as well. I love the movie, which I actually watched the movie first and then I read the book, which they're so similar that I feel like there's no really wrong way to enjoy it. But either way, it is such a great story, and it's really short, but there's so much I feel like that you feel like you go through, that this could have been a 500-page story, and I would have been like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then we have The Patient by Jasper DeWitt, another book I've talked about many times, because the first time I read this, I could not get it out of my head. I still can't. I love this book so much. And this is about an eternal patient, basically. He has been in this mental institution for his whole life. They still don't know what's wrong with him. They still don't know how to help him. And anyone that gets too close to him is either driven into madness or suicide, or they just lose their mind. And so a new doctor comes in and he's like, you know what? I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to try and figure out what is going on. And this is his story. There's some journal entries and things like that to where he's writing down what he's going through, what he's found. And it's almost like he's playing detective and you're along for the ride. But this is just such an amazing story, and it's one of those that you just won't forget. And then we have Gothic by Philip Fracassi, and this is about a famous but struggling horror author, and he's gifted an antique desk, a beautiful desk, which is slowly changing his life. So it's not only changing the way he writes, but it's also changing his personality. It's changing the way he interacts with his girlfriend and his daughter and pretty much the rest of the world. Meanwhile, there's also a woman. She is seeking out about an antique family heirloom that has been lost through time. And so these stories kind of interconnect, and this just makes for it feels very like 70s, 80s horror, but it feels very classic to me. Even from the cover, I felt like, not that I'd seen it before, but maybe I had experienced something similar to that in a different horror story, but it is different. It is new. It just feels old. And I think he did that on purpose, just because you want to feel like maybe this is something that is very old that you're kind of re-experiencing. But this was a really good book. It's really dark. It goes to a lot of places that I didn't expect at first, but it's just something that I really feel like you've got to read for yourself. Okay, so next we have His Black Tongue by Mitchell Luthi, and this is about a plague-ravaged land that has a spot that is seemingly untouched. And so the church has sent a priest to figure out like what's going on, what have they possibly done different that the rest of the world doesn't know about. Seemingly, there's really nothing at first on the surface, but once he starts digging, he comes to find out that everyone is terrified of this portal that is kind of protecting this area, but in a very sinister way. And this has 3 or 4 different stories in it, but this was my favorite, and I didn't really want to go into the other ones because they are pretty short. But this was just such a very dark and heavy story. It's different. It's not something like I've really read before, and it was just something I really enjoyed and something that really kind of stuck with me. Okay, so that was my 20 through 11. I read so much horror. I read so many books that it was really hard to cut it down to just, my top 10. So I just decided to do my top 20. So next week I'm going to do my top 10. Hopefully you guys can get some really good recommendations from these videos. So hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.